served from 1989 until 2003. Only the second African American mayor in the history of Charleston County. He was also shot in the first shooting in American history, first mass shooting in American history to happen on a college campus, the Orangeburg Massacre, in 1968. He's 74 years old, and he still has the bullet in his hip to this very day.
So coming from that history, how has that shaped you?
It's shaped me profoundly because we, as a family, we lived our lives on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news. So, because my father was a revolutionary, he made a lot of enemies who happened to be white and happened to be racist. When he was on the campaign trail in 1988, they would call our house and say that they say Herbert, and we would recognize the voices on the answer machine. Because years ago, you would have answer machine, and I know my mother still has some of the little tape recordings of it. They would say Herbert. Now, if you think you're gonna run for mayor, because there ain't gonna be no nigga mayor Hollywood. It ain't gonna be no nigga mayor Hollywood. So if you think you're gonna run for mayor, you can get that out of your mind. Because we're gonna burn the house down. When your family come running out of the house, we're gonna shoot them. We're gonna string you up by your nuts, and we're gonna cut your nuts off. And that was our life. Um, so he a tremendously strong man. The strongest man I think I've probably ever met, because from the time that he came to office in 1989 to the time that he was defeated in 2003, only by 8 votes, uh, he endured racism, endured people who did not want to see him work on behalf of African Americans in Hollywood. Still the longest serving mayor in the history of Hollywood, and most people say the best mayor that Hollywood has ever had. So, he profoundly shaped my upbringing, profoundly shaped my life. My mother as well. My mother Linda Gadson, my father Herbert Gadson, my mother Linda Gadson, who is the first African American woman to graduate from the College of Charleston. The reason that's so significant, the College of Charleston is the oldest college in the South, and it is the first municipal college in the United States of America. And in 1972, Linda Gadson became the first African American woman to graduate from College of Charleston. So, um, so like I said, my upbringing was a bit different. We endured a lot, encountered a lot, but we triumphed over a lot of things I think that would have broken most families. Mm-hmm. So I liken all the time. Your parents, I think, to a certain degree, everyone's parents said, "Now, whatever happens in this house stays in this house. You do not take anything out of this house that happens within these 4 walls." We didn't have that option because everything that happened in our house was on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news. So, because in addition to being mayor, my father was also a womanizer. That was chronicled all over the media. Was charged with rape in 1991. Charges were later dropped, um, and was also involved in a very public affair, scandal with his secretary. So all of this happens in the eye of the media, and this is how I grew up. So, uh, so we've been through a lot, but God has been good to us.
So, what do you think? You know, obviously your father endured a lot, and what do you think prepared him for that type of life? His upbringing. Do you know anything about his upbringing?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, this is the book I've written about our lives. It's Hallelujah in Hollywood, a true Hollywood story, endorsed by Oscar winner Susan Sarandon. And it tells about our lives in Hollywood. So yeah, I know the story chapter and verse. He was abandoned by his parents, so it wasn't unusual for African Americans seeking a better life in the 40s, 50s, and 60s to go up north to try to see if they could get a better understanding and a better way to live, at least economically. So his parents, mother and father, left and went to New York and left him with his aunt and uncle. The 2 brothers married 2 sisters, so they were left him and his 2 little sisters. Daddy was 6, One sister was 5, the other was 4. So they were left with the aunt and uncle. And my grand aunt who raised him, who I called grandmother, she was an alcoholic. She endured a lot. And her husband, who I called grandfather, granddaddy, but was really my granduncle, had quite a story himself. Ran moonshine, had more than one family between his moonshine operation in Hollywood and Beaufort and Bluffton, South Carolina, where he was from. So, um, my father growing up endured a lot, and saw things that in his upbringing with his mother, which I chronicle in the book, um, that will alter a child's life adversely forever. So he comes up in this time. Economic circumstances were extremely difficult. They grew up in the kind of poverty that one would liken probably to Bangladesh. It was just that horrific for him growing up and seeing all the things that traumatized him and his family. So it's one thing to get abandoned by one set of parents, and in a sense get abandoned by the other set of parents that you were sent to live with, which was his experience. So to come from that environment and that upbringing to then um, become mayor of his hometown and serve for as long as he served in the eye of a storm that I don't think a whole lot of people would have been able to endure. Getting shot at 19 by the police in Orangeburg, attempting to desegregate the All-Star Bowling Alley in Orangeburg, um, and beaten. And this is the component of the Orangeburg massacre that a lot of people don't know. Before Daddy was shot, February 8th, 1968, he was beaten by the police 2 days prior at the All-Star Bowling Alley. Daddy and a few others attempted to enter the bowling alley, and the police beat him and the others, and he still has that scar on him 54 years later. Still has the bullet in him, still has the marks from the billy club that the police beat the hell out of him with 54 years later. So these are the things that shaped my life.
And so the Orangeburg Massacre obviously is like almost a turning point,
Mm-hmm.
in Southern Black history, Southern
Absolutely.
history, South Carolina history, however you want to chalk it up. Being that you were the child of someone who was so involved in that historical event, how just take us through like what it was like growing up and just being a part of that, because I'm assuming you were alive during. How old are you?
No, I'm 44. The massacre
Okay.
happened. For just turned 45. The massacre happened February 8th, 1968. My mother got pregnant with my brother a couple months after the massacre, which is how she ended up at the College of Charleston. So my mother started off at South Carolina State, got pregnant with my brother, had to transfer from South Carolina State to the College of Charleston so she could be home with her new baby and get that familial support. So so that's how she ended up at the college. But to hear Daddy's stories 50 something years later, and that event still deeply resonates and still affects him even now, after everything that he's been through. Whenever he hears about a shooting of an unarmed black person at the hands of the police, he still cries, because he relives that night over and over again. And so to hear those stories growing up, and to hear just how he was affected by that event. I can remember being 9, 10 years old, and on Friday nights he would, because as I mentioned, he was a highly functioning alcoholic, genius level IQ. So on Friday nights and on the weekends, when he would start drinking and get drunk, he would talk about the Orangeburg Massacre. So I knew the story chapter and verse probably before I turned 10 years old. And just him talking about just how cold it was that night. This was February. Talking about how cold it was that night, and just hearing the screams of those students as the police shot into that crowd of 200 demonstrators. and him realizing that he got shot as he's laying on the ground, blood spurting out of his hip, and not knowing if he was going to live or die. Um, that kind of thing. Once you get an understanding of it, and kind of realize exactly what's happened to your father, it kind of gives you a different kind of perspective on life in general. And just him talking about being able to actually smell the blood, not just see the blood coming out of his hip, but because so many people, there were 30 students that were shot that night. 3 black boys were murdered that night. But for him to be on that ground and blood on him, on his pants, shooting out of his hip, and being able to smell the blood of people that were shot right next to him on the ground, that alters you. Being able to hear it, so I can only imagine him going through it, what that must have been like. Um, I I think about him all the time and just everything that has happened with him and with us. Um, to have that kind of upbringing and to still be able to raise a family, still be able to take Hollywood, South Carolina, which prior to him becoming mayor, had no water or sewer services. So if a town doesn't have infrastructure, you really don't even have a town. Daddy brought water and sewer services to Hollywood, brought Hollywood out of the Stone Ages into modern times, and he did that. He did that almost single-handedly. So to have that kind of political genius, and also have the kind of just the kind of brokenness that he went through growing up, um, had a profound effect on me, and even my mother's experience at the College of Charleston. Uh, the only reason the College of Charleston desegregated after the 1954 Brown and Board education decision, the College of Charleston said, okay, well, since we have to desegregate, what we're going to do, we're going to make this institution private, so that we do not have to admit African Americans. The College of Charleston tried unsuccessfully to be a private institution. You solicit those dollars and try to fundraise and all that. The College of Charleston failed as a private institution. So in order to get those federal dollars, it finally said in 1967. So from 1954, when the Brown decision is handed down, to 1967, the College of Charleston tries to become a private institution, unsuccessfully. In 1967, the College of Charleston says, okay, well, we'll admit African American students because we need to get these federal dollars to support the institution. So in 1969, my mother enters the College of Charleston spring of 1969, and they made it very clear to them, those first group of African American students, that they were not welcome, that they were not wanted, and the experience that she had was a harrowing one. So to be a single mother, coming from abject poverty herself, to the College of Charleston, a place, a hallowed, veritable institution of higher learning, extremely respected across America, but to go there each and every day and know that you're not wanted, and to have very visible signs of racism on the campus to let you know that you're not wanted. My mother, an extremely powerful woman in and of her own right. So, and she goes on, graduates in 1972, and as I said, becomes the first black woman to graduate from the College of Charleston, a title that she shares, that designation that she shares with 3 other women as they all graduated in 1972. So she becomes a force for amazing good on these 5 sea islands when she became a part of Rural Mission Incorporated, which was the nonprofit that operated from 1969 until 2019. Here on John's Island, but they fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and provided shelter to the poor on these 5 sea islands of Charleston. And my mother served as executive director. She came there coordinating volunteer projects in 1972. And in 1982, she became executive director of Rural Mission. So became a local icon here on these five state islands. In fact, one publication called her the Mother Teresa of John's Island. If that kind of gives you an indication of just what she accomplished in the lives that she saved. So
Wow. So just, in closing, I just want to give you an opportunity to, given all the history that you just shared from mother to your father, what does that mean to like the generations coming up? What would you, just all the knowledge that you've acquired through these experiences, what would you tell?
we can't give up. We can't give up. Because if you grew up in the situation that I grew up in, it was enough to break you. When you are constantly scrutinized, you live in a fishbowl where everyone knows exactly what's going on in your home, and there's no conjecture about it because they saw everything on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news and in the newspaper. Um, they saw it. So, you know, it forces you to become very acquainted with the truth. It forces you to confront the truth, and actually, on a lot of levels, it forces you to embrace the truth. So, I think for future generations, I think the message is number one, um, your truth belongs to you, so embrace it. Um, and whatever it is that you go through, whatever adversity that you experience, you can't give up. You absolutely positively cannot give up. Because the one thing that you realize is whatever happens today, um, you know with 100% certainty that if you do not fight until tomorrow, you know it's not going to get better because you did not fight until tomorrow. So, whatever it is that we go through as African Americans, it is ingrained and embedded in our DNA that we fight, and that we fight to the bitter end, not just for us, but for our posterity and for our future generations. So, especially given the place that we are in history right now, coming up on the midterm elections and in 2024, um, another presidential election, I think it is imperative, it is vital that we as African Americans, that we understand what our role is traditionally in America, um, that the country that we built, um, while it may be staunchly against us, while the forces of evil that seek to minimize and marginalize us are still very much present, uh, it is incumbent upon us to continue to fight and fight our souls until death.
Thank you so much. Wow.